The signal. Ethan Drake lounged in the cockpit of his ship, the stellar horizon, letting the dull hum of the engines fill the silence. He adjusted the controls absent-mindedly, his eyes scanning the sea of stars stretched before him. Space was vast and lonely, but it had been his home for years. "Ethan, you picking up that anomaly?" came a voice through the comms. It was Marcus Kent, his closest friend and navigator, stationed in the ship's lower deck. "Yeah, it's faint, but it's there," Ethan replied, leaning closer to the console. A series of blips danced across his screen, forming a rhythmic, almost melodic sequence. "It's not a natural signal." Marcus's voice crackled back. "Think it's a distress call?" "Possibly," Ethan said, furrowing his brow. "But it's weird. It's not like any human signal I've seen." Ethan flipped a switch, amplifying the transmission. The sound that emerged was mesmerizing, a combination of tones that seemed to resonate somewhere deep within him. He glanced at the coordinates. The signal was coming from a nearby asteroid belt, an area notorious for being a haven for scavengers and smugglers. "This could be a trap," Marcus warned, his voice tinged with concern. "You sure about this?" Ethan smirked. "When have I ever been sure about anything?" "Prep the scanners. We're heading in." The stellar horizon glided into the asteroid field, its thrusters carefully navigating the dense maze of rock and debris. Ethan's hands danced over the controls, his years of experience evident in the fluidity of his movements. "There," Marcus said, pointing at the viewport as they approached a sleek, silver vessel wedged between two massive asteroids. Its design was nothing like the bulky, utilitarian ships of human origin. It was elegant, almost organic, with faint lights flickering across its surface. "Holy hell," Ethan muttered. "That's not one of ours." Marcus whistled low. "First contact, maybe? Or at least, first salvage. Think it's abandoned?" "Only one way to find out," Ethan said, grabbing his sidearm. "Keep the engines hot in case we need to make a quick exit." He suited up, his helmet's HUD displaying life support stats as he stepped into the airlock. The ship's exterior shimmered in the dim light of the asteroid field, its hull smooth and unmarred despite its precarious position. Ethan activated his magnetic boots, stepping carefully onto the alien vessel. "Life signs?" Ethan asked through the comms. Marcus's voice was steady. "Barely. One faint reading inside." Ethan found an access hatch and pried it open, stepping into a dimly lit corridor. The air was breathable, though tinged with a metallic scent. He followed the faint hum of the life support system, his boots clanking softly against the floor. As he turned a corner, his eyes landed on a figure slumped against the wall. It was a woman. At least, she resembled one. Her features were humanoid, but her skin had an iridescent sheen that shifted colors as she moved. Her hair floated gently, as though she were underwater, and her clothing seemed to be made of the same material as her ship's hull. Ethan approached cautiously, his hand hovering near his sidearm. "Hey, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, revealing pupils that glowed faintly. She looked at him with a mix of confusion and fear, her lips moving but no sound coming out. "I'm not here to hurt you," Ethan said, lowering his voice. He knelt beside her, noting the strange device embedded in her wrist. "My name's Ethan. Can you understand me?" She blinked slowly, then tilted her head, her gaze softening. "Ethan," she said, her voice melodic and tentative. Marcus's voice crackled in his ear. "Ethan, what's going on? You okay?" "I found her," Ethan replied, still staring at the alien woman. "She's alive." The woman reached out weakly, her hand brushing against Ethan's glove. He felt a strange warmth radiating through the suit, as though her touch carried more than just physical heat. "We need to get her back to the ship," Ethan said. "She's in bad shape." "Roger that," Marcus replied. "I'll prep the med bay." Ethan carefully lifted the woman, her body light and almost weightless. As he carried her back to the stellar horizon, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than a chance rescue. There was something deeply unfamiliar, yet oddly familiar about her, as though her presence stirred something buried within him. Once aboard, Marcus met him in the airlock, his eyes wide as he took in the alien woman. "Damn, Ethan. You weren't kidding." "Help me get her to the med bay," Ethan said, urgency in his tone. Together, they placed her on the examination table. Marcus began scanning her with a handheld device, his brow furrowing as the readings displayed alien metrics they couldn't fully understand. "She's stabilizing," Marcus said. "Whatever tech she's got in her body, it's doing most of the work." The woman's eyes opened again, locking onto Ethan. Her voice was stronger this time. "Thank you." Ethan nodded, his curiosity and protectiveness intertwining. "You're safe now. Rest. We'll figure this out together." As the medbay's lights dimmed, signaling a rest cycle, Ethan stood by her side, wondering what her story was and how their lives had suddenly become intertwined. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning of a journey that would change everything. Chapter 2. Stranded Together. Ethan leaned against the wall of the Stellar Horizons medbay, watching as the alien woman, Aria, as she had softly introduced herself, rested. Her iridescent skin shimmered faintly under the low light, and her breathing had steadied. Marcus, seated nearby, was typing away on a tablet, running scans and cross-referencing data. "Anything useful yet?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Marcus shook his head. "Not much. Her biology is, well, alien. What we do know is that her body seems to have some sort of self-repair mechanism. It's fascinating." Ethan frowned, his arms crossed. "Fascinating doesn't explain what she's doing here or why her ship was dead in space." "She'll need to tell us that herself," Marcus replied. "And if we're lucky, she'll tell us before her friends, or enemies, show up." As if on cue, Aria stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around, her gaze finally settling on Ethan. "Where am I?" "You're on my ship," Ethan said, stepping closer. "The Stellar Horizon. We picked up your distress signal and found you drifting." Her expression softened. "Thank you, Ethan." Marcus smirked. "No mention of me. I helped too, you know." Ethan shot him a look, but Aria's lips curled into a faint smile. "Thank you, Marcus." She tried to sit up, wincing as her body protested. Ethan moved to help her, his hands steadying her shoulders. "Take it slow," he said. "You've been through a lot." Aria nodded, her gaze shifting to Marcus's tablet, which displayed an image of her damaged ship. "My vessel. Is it intact?" "Barely," Marcus said. "The exterior hull's in decent shape, but the power systems are fried. We're working on it." Ethan knelt beside her. "Aria, can you tell us what happened? Why were you out there alone?" Her eyes flickered with hesitation before she answered. "I was fleeing from my people. They do not agree with my beliefs, my curiosity about other civilizations. They see it as a threat to our unity." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a fun crowd." Ethan ignored him, his focus on Aria. "So you left them? Came out here on your own?" "I had to," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in it. "I wanted to understand more, about the universe, about others. My people believe in isolation, in staying apart to preserve our ways. I couldn't accept that." Ethan exchanged a glance with Marcus before speaking again. "You're safe here. We'll help you get your ship running, and you can figure out what's next." Arya's expression softened further. "You would do that for me? Even though I am not like you?" Ethan chuckled. "Out here, no one's really like anyone else. We've all got our quirks. Besides, I've got a soft spot for stranded travelers." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "He's also got a habit of sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. So don't be surprised if we end up in trouble because of this." Arya tilted her head, her shimmering hair cascading over her shoulder. "Trouble seems to follow those with kind hearts." "Great," Marcus muttered. "Now we're poetic." Ethan smirked but didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Arya. "You should rest more. We'll figure out the next steps once you're stronger." "No," she said, shaking her head gently. "I can help. My ship's systems are complex. You will need me to restore them." Marcus crossed his arms. "She's got a point. Alien tech isn't exactly in the repair manual." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but no overexerting yourself. Marcus, get her some tools. We'll head to her ship and start working." A few hours later, the three of them were aboard Arya's vessel. The interior was as sleek and elegant as its exterior, though the damage was more extensive than they'd initially thought. Panels were charred, and faint scorch marks marred the walls. "This isn't from an asteroid impact," Ethan observed, running a hand over a scorched panel. "Looks like weapons fire." Arya nodded solemnly. "They didn't want me to leave. They tried to stop me." Marcus let out a low whistle. "You've got some guts, I'll give you that." Arya smiled faintly, kneeling beside a console. Her fingers danced over the controls, her touch deliberate and precise. The console flickered to life, displaying a complex array of symbols and patterns. "Can you read that?" Ethan asked, peering over her shoulder. "Yes," she said. "It is my language. I can repair this, but I will need time, and your assistance." Ethan crouched beside her. "Tell me what to do." Marcus leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You're getting awfully cozy over there, Ethan." Ethan shot him a glare. "Focus on the task, Marcus." "Fine, fine," Marcus said, grinning. "But I'm keeping the engines warm, just in case your new friend's past catches up with us." As the hours passed, Ethan and Arya worked side by side, her calm guidance complementing his practical know-how. They fell into an easy rhythm, their hands often brushing as they passed tools back and forth. Every now and then, Ethan would catch her glancing at him, a curious, almost grateful expression on her face. By the time they returned to the stellar horizon, Arya's ship was partially functional, its life support and communication systems restored. Exhausted but satisfied, the three of them collapsed into the ship's lounge. "Not bad for a day's work," Marcus said, raising a protein bar in mock toast. Ethan looked at Arya, her iridescent skin glowing faintly in the dim light. "You did great today." She met his gaze, her voice soft but steady. "I couldn't have done it without you." As the stellar horizon drifted among the stars, Ethan found himself wondering if their rescue mission had been the beginning of something far greater than he'd imagined. Chapter 3. An Alien's Heart. The stellar horizon cruised through the quiet expanse of space, its engines humming softly. Inside, Ethan, Marcus, and Arya had settled into a steady routine. Repairs on Arya's ship continued, and she had begun to integrate into their small crew, though her alien nature still set her apart in ways that intrigued and occasionally unsettled the humans. Ethan found himself spending more time with her. She was a fast learner, picking up human languages and customs with an ease that bordered on uncanny. Yet, beneath her calm demeanor, he could sense something deeper, an unease she tried to mask. "Ethan, are you free?" Arya's voice came softly through the calms. Ethan, who was reviewing navigation charts in the cockpit, tapped his headset. "Always for you. What's up? Can you come to the observation deck? There's something I wish to discuss." "I'm on my way." When Ethan arrived, he found Arya gazing out at the stars, her iridescent skin reflecting the faint glow of distant constellations. She turned as he approached, her expression calm but her luminous eyes holding a glimmer of vulnerability. "What's on your mind?" Ethan asked, leaning against the railing beside her. She hesitated, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the console. "Your stars are endless. They remind me of home, yet they are unfamiliar. It makes me feel," she searched for the word, "small." Ethan chuckled softly. "That's something we all feel out here. The universe is vast, and we're just tiny specks trying to make sense of it." Arya tilted her head, studying him. "You speak of it with acceptance. My people see it as a reason to isolate, to protect what little we have. But you explore. Why?" "Because staying in one place feels like giving up," Ethan replied. "There's so much out there to see, to learn. Why wouldn't we try?" Arya's gaze dropped to her hands. "It's not so simple for my kind. Connection to others. It is seen as a weakness, a risk." "Why's that?" Ethan asked, his curiosity piqued. "We value unity above all," she explained. "Emotional connections to those outside our world are viewed as distractions, even dangers. I left because I couldn't accept that. I wanted more." Ethan reached out, gently placing a hand over hers. "Sounds like you made the right choice." Arya's eyes flicked to their hands, her skin shimmering faintly at his touch. "Perhaps. But it is difficult. The more I learn about your kind, the more I realize how much I've missed." The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's voice over the intercom. "Ethan, Arya, you might want to get down here. We've got company." Ethan's jaw tightened. "On our way." In the cockpit, Marcus was glued to the scanners. "We've got 2 ships closing in. Not broadcasting friendly signals, either." Ethan slid into the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls. "Pirates?" "Probably," Marcus replied. "Looks like they're running old military surplus. Nothing we can't handle, but we need to stay sharp." Arya hovered near the doorway, her expression tense. "Can we outrun them?" Ethan grinned. "We can sure try." The stellar horizon roared to life, accelerating toward a nearby asteroid field. The 2 hostile ships followed, their weapons lighting up the void. Ethan's expert piloting sent the horizon weaving through the jagged rocks, narrowly avoiding enemy fire. "Marcus, I need you on countermeasures." Ethan barked. "Already on it," Marcus replied, deploying chaff that disrupted the pirates' targeting systems. Arya clung to the railing, her normally composed demeanor shaken. "Do you always live this dangerously?" Ethan glanced back at her with a smirk. "Only on the fun days." The horizon dove through a narrow canyon within the asteroid field, shaking off one of the pursuing ships. The second, however, was more persistent. Marcus managed to disable it with a well-placed EMP burst, leaving it adrift. Ethan exhaled, his grip on the controls relaxing. "That'll teach them not to mess with us." Marcus leaned back in his seat. "And here I thought today was going to be boring." Later, as the crew regrouped in the lounge, the tension from the skirmish began to fade. Marcus was recounting the action with dramatic flair, earning a rare laugh from Arya. And then Ethan pulls this crazy move, threading us through an asteroid the size of a city. I thought for sure we were goners, Marcus said, gesturing wildly. Ethan rolled his eyes. It wasn't that dramatic. Arya smiled, her luminous eyes meeting Ethan's. It was impressive. Marcus grinned. See, she gets it. As the laughter died down, Arya turned to Ethan, her expression softening. Thank you for protecting us. Ethan shrugged. It's what I do. No, she said, her voice steady. It's more than that. You care. Even for someone like me, someone you barely know. Ethan met her gaze, feeling the unspoken connection between them deepen. You're part of this crew now, Arya. That means we look out for each other. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Arya reached out, placing her hand lightly on his arm. I have never known such loyalty. It is comforting. Ethan's voice softened. Stick around, and you'll see a lot more of it. As the stellar horizon resumed its quiet journey through the stars, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that Arya's presence was beginning to change him, not just as a captain, but as a man. Whatever lay ahead, he knew she would be at the center of it. Chapter 4. When Lines Blur. The stellar horizon floated in the quiet void, its crew enjoying a rare moment of calm. Repairs on Arya's ship were nearing completion, and the tension of the previous encounter with pirates had given way to a sense of uneasy relief. Ethan found himself spending even more time with Arya, drawn by her curiosity about humanity and the way she seemed to light up when she learned something new. Ethan was in the engine room, adjusting a coolant valve, when Arya appeared in the doorway. Her glowing eyes seemed to take in everything with quiet wonder. "Do you always work this late?" she asked, her voice soft. Ethan glanced over his shoulder and grinned. "Engines don't maintain themselves. What's keeping you up?" "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, stepping closer. "Your ship hums in a way I'm not used to. It's soothing, but also strange." "Well, stick around long enough, and you'll find it's got its own rhythm," Ethan said, tightening a bolt. "What about your ships? What do they sound like?" Arya tilted her head, considering. "Silent. Athelian vessels are designed to blend with the void, to move unnoticed. But I think I prefer your ship. It feels alive." Ethan chuckled. "You're full of surprises, you know that?" She smiled faintly, leaning against the wall. "I could say the same about you." Later that night, Ethan found Arya on the observation deck, her silhouette framed by the endless stars. She didn't notice him at first, her focus entirely on the galaxy stretching before her. "Can't sleep again?" he asked, approaching slowly. She turned, her expression softer than he'd ever seen it. "The stars, they remind me of home, but they also remind me of how far I've come." Ethan joined her at the railing. "That's not always a bad thing. Sometimes distance helps you see things clearer." "Is that why you're here? Out in the void, far from your own home?" she asked, her tone curious. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. I needed space to figure out who I am, what I want. Turns out, the answers are harder to find than I thought." Arya tilted her head, her luminous hair catching the faint light. "I think you've found more answers than you realize. Your kindness, your bravery, they're part of who you are. You just haven't acknowledged them yet." Her words caught him off guard, and for a moment he couldn't look away from her. "You see a lot, don't you?" he said, his voice quiet. "It's hard not to," she replied, stepping closer. "You're different. Your kind is different. You feel so much, even when it's difficult. It's beautiful." Ethan's heart raced as the space between them seemed to shrink. You think we're beautiful? I'd say you're the one who's, he trailed off, his voice faltering as her eyes met his. For a moment, they stood in silence, the stars around them forgotten. Then, almost hesitantly, Arya reached out, her fingers brushing against his. The contact sent a warmth through Ethan that he couldn't explain, as if her touch carried an unspoken language. "Ethan," she murmured, her voice trembling slightly, "I don't know what this feeling is, but it's new, and I don't want it to stop." He stepped closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "Then don't." Her eyes closed as he leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deepened as they both gave in to the moment. Arya's hands slid up to his shoulders, her touch light but filled with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily, their foreheads resting against each other. "That was," Arya began, searching for the words. "Amazing," Ethan finished, a grin tugging at his lips. She smiled, her iridescent skin glowing faintly. "Is this what humans call love?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "It's the start of it, yeah." Arya's gaze softened. "Then I think I'm beginning to understand why your kind values it so much." The next morning, Marcus greeted Ethan with a knowing smirk as they worked on a navigation recalibration. "You look rested. Something happened last night." Ethan shot him a look. "Not your business, Marcus." "Hey, I'm just saying, there's a glow about you. Maybe it's from a certain alien princess." Ethan sighed, trying to focus on the console. "She's not a princess. Fine, queen, empress, whatever. Point is, you're smitten." Ethan paused, a faint smile creeping onto his face. "Maybe I am." Marcus chuckled. "Well, just don't forget, lovebird, we've still got work to do. Romance doesn't fix busted engines." As the day went on, Ethan and Arya found moments to steal glances, their connection deepening with every shared smile and quiet exchange. For Ethan, the lines between his duty and his feelings had begun to blur, but he couldn't bring himself to care. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing. Arya had become a part of his life in a way he hadn't expected, and he wasn't about to let go. Chapter 5. A Human's Love. The days aboard the Stellar Horizon passed in a haze of routine and discovery. Arya's presence had shifted the dynamics of the crew, her curiosity about human life and her growing bond with Ethan becoming a central part of their daily interactions. Marcus, ever the observant one, alternated between teasing Ethan and giving him space to figure out what his feelings meant. The crew was gathered in the mess hall, sharing a meal of rehydrated rations. Marcus poked at his plate with mock disdain. "You'd think with all this tech, someone could invent a way to make this taste like actual food." Ethan smirked. "Maybe you should add chef to your list of talents." "Not likely," Marcus replied, leaning back in his chair. His gaze flicked to Arya, who was delicately examining her portion. "What do you think, Arya? Human cuisine living up to the hype?" She tilted her head, considering. "It is functional. But I do not think I understand why you eat this way. On Athelion, food is created to nourish both the body and the mind. Well, on Earth, it's created to not kill us. Big difference," Marcus quipped. Arya smiled faintly, her iridescent skin glowing slightly in the low light. "Perhaps I could show you something of my world's approach. Our methods are different, but perhaps there is something you might enjoy." Ethan leaned forward, intrigued. "You can cook." "It is not cooking as you would define it," she replied, "but I can create sustenance using my ship systems. It may take time to adapt the process, but I would like to share it with you." Marcus grinned. Now we're talking. Alien gourmet night. Arya's gaze shifted to Ethan, her voice softening. Would you join me? I would like to make something special. Ethan nodded, warmth spreading through him. Of course. That evening, while Marcus worked on navigation and systems checks, Ethan joined Arya in the cargo bay, where she had set up a small workstation with tools from her ship. The air between them was charged with quiet anticipation, their growing connection unspoken but undeniable. Arya gestured to a sleek device on the table. This is a synthesizer. It uses molecular restructuring to create sustenance. It may not replicate your foods exactly, but I will try. Ethan watched as she moved with graceful precision, her fingers dancing over the device's interface. You make it look easy. It is second nature to me, she said, glancing at him. But this, sharing something of my world with you, it feels different. Important. He stepped closer, his voice lowering. It is. To me, too. Her hands stilled, and she turned to face him fully. Ethan, I have been trying to understand something. This connection between us. Is it common among your people? He hesitated, searching her luminous eyes. Not really. What we have. It's rare. And it's not something I expected to find, especially not out here. Her expression softened, and she reached out, her fingers brushing against his. It is new to me as well. But it feels right. Their proximity deepened, and for a moment, the world outside the cargo bay faded. Ethan lifted a hand to her cheek, his thumb grazing her iridescent skin. It is, he murmured. Arya closed the gap between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was tender but filled with unspoken emotion. Her hands slid to his shoulders, her touch light but electric. Ethan responded instinctively, pulling her closer as their connection deepened. When they pulled apart, both were breathless, their foreheads resting together. That was unlike anything I have ever known, Arya whispered. Ethan smiled. Me too. She looked at him, her voice trembling slightly. Your kind speaks of love. Is this what it feels like? He nodded, his heart pounding. Yeah, this is it. Arya's smile widened, and she leaned in for another kiss, her glowing skin shimmering faintly in the dim light. Then I am grateful to have found it. With you. The following morning, Marcus noticed the subtle changes in how Ethan and Arya interacted. They were closer now, their bond evident in the way they moved around each other. He cornered Ethan in the cockpit as they prepped for the day's repairs. "All right, spill," Marcus said, leaning against the console. "What happened last night?" Ethan glanced at him, a sheepish grin on his face. "What makes you think something happened?" "Oh, I don't know," Marcus drawled. "Maybe it's the fact that you're practically glowing. Did you two finally?" Ethan shook his head, laughing. "It's not what you think, Marcus. We just connected." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Connected, huh? Well, whatever you call it, just don't let it distract you from the work." "It won't," Ethan said, his tone serious. "But Marcus, this thing with Arya, it's real." Marcus studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I can see that. Just be careful, all right? Relationships out here aren't exactly simple." Ethan smiled. "When are they ever?" As the day unfolded, the stellar horizon continued its journey, but the crew's focus was no longer solely on repairs or navigation. For Ethan, every moment with Arya was a reminder of how extraordinary their connection was, something rare and fragile in the vastness of space. And for Arya, the human concept of love was no longer a mystery, but a reality she was eager to explore further. Chapter 6. A World Divided. The The stellar horizon had docked on a remote human settlement orbiting a dying red dwarf star. The outpost, officially nameless but known to its inhabitants as Haven, was a hub for independent traders, smugglers, and explorers. It was a place where questions were rarely asked, but curiosity always lingered. Ethan, Marcus, and Arya descended the ship's ramp, the buzz of Haven's activity washing over them. Arya stayed close to Ethan, her hood pulled over her head to obscure her iridescent features. Though the settlement tolerated all sorts, she was undeniably different, and Ethan didn't want to take chances. "Stick close," Ethan muttered. "Haven might be neutral territory, but that doesn't mean everyone here is friendly." "Understood," Arya replied softly, her voice tinged with curiosity as she glanced at the bustling market stalls and passing traders. Marcus surveyed the crowd, his hand resting near his sidearm. "This place hasn't changed much. Still smells like burned oil and bad decisions." Ethan grinned. "Just the way you like it." They made their way to a parts dealer, a grizzled man with cybernetic arms who greeted Ethan with a wide, toothy smile. "Ethan Drake. Thought you were dead or worse. What brings you to my fine establishment?" "Still kicking, Vic," Ethan said, leaning on the counter. "I need some fusion stabilizers and a few core regulators. Got anything that fits a hybrid build?" Vic scratched his stubbled chin. "Might have something in the back. Give me a minute." As Vic disappeared into his storage room, Arya studied the array of parts lining the shelves, her luminous eyes narrowing in concentration. "Your technology is so improvised. It's fascinating." "It gets the job done," Ethan said with a shrug. "You don't always need fancy tech to survive." Her lips curved into a small smile. "Perhaps there is beauty in simplicity." Vic returned moments later, dropping a dusty box onto the counter. "These should work, but you'll need to calibrate them yourself." "Wouldn't expect anything less," Ethan said, passing over a handful of credits. "Thanks, Vic." The trio left the shop, heading toward the docking bay when a sharp voice called out behind them. "Ethan Drake. Stop right there." Ethan froze, turning slowly to see a tall man with sharp features flanked by two armed guards. His uniform marked him as part of the settlement's makeshift security force. Behind him stood a middle-aged woman in a trader's outfit, her gaze fixed on Arya. "Captain Harris," Ethan greeted cautiously. "What can I do for you?" Harris's eyes narrowed. "Word travels fast in Haven. Someone saw you with an unusual passenger." The trader stepped forward. "She's not one of us. She's dangerous." Ethan stepped in front of Arya, his hand resting on his sidearm. "She's not dangerous. She's my crew." The woman scoffed. "Your crew? She's an alien. Who knows what she's capable of?" Arya stepped forward, pulling back her hood. The crowd that had gathered gasped at her shimmering features, her glowing eyes scanning the faces before her. "I am no threat," she said calmly. "I seek only understanding. Your captain and his crew saved me." Harris studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You expect us to believe that? Why should we trust you?" Arya hesitated, but Ethan stepped in. "Because she's done nothing to harm anyone. She's just trying to survive, like the rest of us." The trader shook her head. "You're putting us all at risk, Drake. What if her people come looking for her?" "They won't," Ethan said firmly. "And even if they did, she's not their enemy. She's trying to escape them." "Enough!" Harris barked, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. He turned to Arya. "If you're staying here, you'll need to prove you're not a danger. Do something useful." Ethan bristled. "She doesn't have to prove anything." But Arya touched his arm, her expression calm. "It's all right, Ethan. If my actions can ease their fears, I will help." That evening, in the settlement's medical bay, Arya demonstrated her abilities. Using her advanced knowledge of molecular biology and her ship's portable tech, she healed a child suffering from a severe infection. The process was quick and painless, leaving the child's parents in awe. "Your science. It's like magic," one of the medics whispered. Arya shook her head. "It is simply an understanding of life at a fundamental level. Your child is strong. They will recover fully." Word of her actions spread quickly, and the tension in Haven began to dissipate. People who had been wary of her now approached with curiosity, asking questions about her world and her abilities. As they returned to the stellar horizon that night, Marcus clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "Well, that could have gone worse. Looks like your alien friend won them over." "She's not just a friend," Ethan said quietly, glancing at Arya as she walked ahead of them. "She's something more." Marcus grinned. "I figured. Just don't let it cloud your judgment, all right?" Ethan nodded, though his mind was already elsewhere. The day's events had only strengthened his feelings for Arya, but they also reminded him of the challenges they would face together. Later, as they stood on the observation deck, Ethan turned to Arya. "You didn't have to do that today. You didn't owe them anything." Arya looked at him, her eyes glowing softly. "Perhaps not. But I wanted to. Your people deserve to see that I am not so different from them." Ethan stepped closer, his voice lowering. "You're more than they'll ever understand." Arya's expression softened. "And you are more than I ever expected to find." Their connection felt unbreakable in that moment, a bond forged in trust and something far deeper. Whatever lay ahead, Ethan knew they would face it together. Chapter 7. The Hardest Choice. The stellar horizon had left Haven behind, the settlement's lights fading into the endless expanse of space. The crew was quiet, the weight of recent events pressing heavily on them. Arya's act of compassion had earned her temporary acceptance, but Ethan knew that fear lingered beneath the surface. Even in a place as rough and tumble as Haven, difference was a risk. Ethan stood in the cockpit, hands gripping the console as he stared at the stars ahead. His thoughts were interrupted by Marcus stepping in with a fresh cup of coffee. "You're brooding again," Marcus said, leaning against the doorway. "Never a good sign." Ethan sighed. "Just thinking about what's next." "For us or for her?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the corridor where Arya's quarters were. "Both," Ethan admitted. "She's safer with us than out there on her own, but it's only a matter of time before her people find her. Or worse, someone less understanding does." Marcus sipped his coffee. "You've been carrying a lot since we found her. It's okay to admit you're in over your head." Ethan shot him a look. "Thanks for the pep talk." "I'm serious," Marcus said. "You care about her. Anyone can see that. But you've got to figure out if you're doing this for her or for you." Before Ethan could respond, the comms panel lit up with a warning. A proximity alert. "Incoming ship," Marcus said, setting his cup down and moving to his station. "Looks big." Ethan quickly took the pilot's seat, pulling up the scanner. The ship was massive, its sleek design and glowing edges unmistakably Athelian. "Damn it," Ethan muttered. "They found her." In the lounge, Arya was already standing, her luminous eyes fixed on the viewport as the ship loomed closer. Ethan and Marcus entered, tension radiating from them. "It's them, isn't it?" Arya asked softly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah. They're hailing us. You want to tell me what to expect?" Arya's expression was unreadable. "They will demand my return." Marcus crossed his arms. And if we say no? They will not attack, she said, though her voice held uncertainty. But they will not leave without me. Ethan took a step closer to her. You don't have to go. We'll figure something out. Arya met his gaze, her expression pained. I cannot let them harm you or Marcus. They won't leave until I am with them. The comms panel beeped again, more insistent this time. Ethan clenched his fists. We need to stall them. Marcus, open the channel. The screen flickered to life, revealing an Athelian figure dressed in flowing silver robes, their iridescent skin shimmering faintly. They regarded the crew with a mixture of curiosity and authority. I am Envoy Kales of the Athelian High Council, the figure said, their voice calm but firm. We have come for our wayward citizen. Arya stepped forward. Kales, she said evenly, I am not returning. I have chosen to leave. Kales's gaze softened slightly. Arya, you know our laws. Your departure was an act of defiance. You must come back to face the council. She's not going anywhere, Ethan interjected, stepping beside her. She's free to make her own choices. Kales's expression darkened. This is not your concern, human. You do not understand the consequences of her actions. I understand plenty, Ethan shot back. And I know that taking her against her isn't happening while I'm around. Arya placed a hand on Ethan's arm, her touch calming him. Ethan, please. Let me speak. She turned back to Kales. I left because I could not accept the isolation our people impose. I wanted to see more, to feel more. I have found something here that I cannot abandon. Kales's gaze flicked to Ethan, then back to Arya. And what you have found is worth defying everything we stand for? Arya hesitated, then nodded. Yes. The screen went dark as Kales ended the transmission. Moments later, a smaller craft detached from the larger ship and began docking procedures with the stellar horizon. What now? Marcus asked. Ethan glanced at Arya. We buy time. Figure out an angle. Kales boarded alone, their presence commanding yet non-threatening. They looked around the ship before settling their gaze on Arya. You have chosen a dangerous path, Kales said, but perhaps there is room for compromise. Arya tilted her head. What do you mean? You have demonstrated compassion, bravery, and the willingness to learn, Kales said. The Council may not agree with your actions, but they will listen if you return willingly. However, their gaze shifted to Ethan. This bond you have formed with the human, it cannot continue. Ethan stepped forward. She's not going anywhere without a fight. Arya's voice cut through the tension. Ethan, stop. He turned to her, disbelief in his eyes. You're seriously considering this? I have to, she said, her voice breaking. For your safety, for Marcus's. I cannot let my actions bring harm to those I care about. Ethan clenched his fists. You don't have to do this alone. We can fight for you. Arya reached out, her hand resting on his cheek. You have already given me so much, more than I ever thought possible. But this is something I must face. Her touch softened him, and he closed his eyes. You don't have to leave. Arya leaned in, their foreheads touching. You have shown me what it means to love, Ethan. That will never leave me, no matter where I go. As Kales escorted Arya back to the docking bay, Ethan and Marcus stood silently, watching her go. The ship departed moments later, disappearing into the vastness of space. Marcus finally broke the silence. You think we'll see her again? Ethan's jaw tightened, his voice low. I don't know. But in his heart, He held on to the hope that their story wasn't over. Chapter 8. Goodbye, for now. The stellar horizon drifted in the quiet vastness of space, its usual hum now a faint backdrop to the heavy silence within. Ethan sat alone in the cockpit, staring at the controls as if willing them to bring answers. It had been hours since Aria's ship disappeared, and the weight of her absence pressed down on him like gravity itself. Footsteps echoed in the corridor behind him. Marcus stepped into the cockpit, his usual smirk absent. "You've been sitting here for a while. Thought you could use some company." Ethan didn't look up. "Just trying to figure out what to do next." "Next?" Marcus asked, pulling up a chair beside him. "Next is survival, like always. But I get it. You're not exactly thinking about fuel levels or supply runs right now." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, finally turning to look at his friend. "She didn't have to go. I should have fought harder." Marcus shrugged. "Maybe. But you know Aria. She made a choice, Ethan. And you've got to respect that." Ethan stared at the stars outside the viewport, his voice low. "Respecting it doesn't make it hurt less." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan. "You've been through a lot worse and come out stronger. This is different. I get that. But you're not alone in this." Ethan gave him a faint smile, appreciating the sentiment even if it didn't lift the ache in his chest. "Thanks, Marcus." A soft chime interrupted their conversation. The comms console lit up, displaying an encrypted message. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he reached for the controls. "Is it?" Marcus peered over his shoulder. "It's from an Athelian source, that's for sure." Ethan opened the message, and Aria's voice filled the cockpit, her tone calm but tinged with longing. "Ethan, I do not know when or if I will be able to send another message, but I wanted you to know. I am safe. The Council has agreed to hear me, though it is uncertain what their decision will be. What I do know is that my time with you changed me in ways I cannot fully explain." Ethan sat frozen, his hand hovering over the console as her words washed over him. "You showed me a world beyond isolation, beyond fear. You showed me love, Ethan. And that will remain with me, no matter where I go." The message ended abruptly, leaving the cockpit in silence once more. Marcus let out a low whistle. "Well, if that's not motivation to keep going, I don't know what is." Ethan replayed the message in his mind, her voice a balm to his fractured heart. "She's fighting for something bigger than both of us. I just wish I could be there with her." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "Maybe someday you will. But until then, we've got a ship to run and a universe full of mysteries to uncover." Ethan nodded, a small flicker of determination igniting within him. "You're right. She wouldn't want me to stop." As the days turned into weeks, Ethan and Marcus fell back into their routine, though the absence of Aria lingered like a shadow. Every now and then, Ethan found himself glancing at the comms console, hoping for another message, another sign that she was out there, thinking of him. One evening, as the stellar horizon coasted through an uncharted sector, Ethan stood on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The vastness of space, once a source of adventure and excitement, now felt heavier, like a reminder of the distance between him and the woman who had become such an integral part of his life. Marcus joined him, handing him a cup of lukewarm coffee. "You've been quiet today." Ethan took the cup with a nod of thanks. "Just thinking about her." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Always." Marcus leaned against the railing, his gaze fixed on the stars. "You know, I used to think you were crazy for chasing signals and diving headfirst into danger. But after seeing what you two had, I get it now. It was worth it." "It still is," Ethan said firmly. Even if she's not here, what we had, it changed me. Marcus grinned. So what's the plan? You gonna sit here pining, or are we gonna keep moving forward? Ethan chuckled, the sound surprising even himself. We keep moving. There's too much out there to stop now. The next day, Ethan and Marcus charted a course for a nearby star cluster rumored to hold ancient ruins. As they worked, the usual rhythm of their banter returned, though it was punctuated by moments of quiet reflection. Late into the night, as Marcus retired to his quarters, Ethan sat alone in the cockpit. He pulled up Aria's message again, letting her voice fill the space around him. Each word was a reminder of what they had shared and what still connected them despite the distance. "I'll see you again," he murmured to the stars, his voice steady. "No matter how far." The stellar horizon surged forward, its engines humming with purpose as it disappeared into the endless expanse of the galaxy, carrying with it a man determined to honor the love he had found across the stars.